Welcome to the Breakneck Podcast with myself, Ian Sweeney, and Matt Pasienski, two AI entrepreneurs navigating daily the world of AI, both from the perspective of using it and delivering it to our customers, but also trying to learn about it. And so, Matt, we have probably the hottest topic around this week and the last week or so in AI. We're going to talk about browsers. Why should we care? Where should we start on this?
Several things are happening simultaneously around browsers. Obviously, we're going to talk about companies releasing new browsers. Second, if you watch previous episodes with Ricky or something like that, like Google might have to give up control of Chrome. So that's going to get broken up. And then third, I think the basic economic model of the web is being broken by AI, because it used to be I would go to a search bar and then I'm going to go to a web page and consume comment. And Google is the company that controls that internet. And then more importantly, all of the advertisement infrastructure to pay people to create that content. And so Google's been using the automated answers at the top, and people are using that extensively. So web traffic to a lot of these things is falling. So the browser is the way that Google provides this version of the internet, which is web pages by independent people and companies that are being paid and discovered and paid through Google's infrastructure. And so that's all going away, whether through Chrome being broken off from Google, and especially with AI. So where does that economic model of people having businesses that rely on Google ads, if ChatGPT just tells you what you want to know by just stealing that little clip without going to the web page and having the banner ads and all those things?
So let's name some names here for a second. Perplexity and OpenAI. These are folks bringing out AI native browsers. So why? What are they after? Well, they're after the money, of course. Where is the money? The money is in the traditional model, the kind of advertising type of a model. It's in the eyeballs as well, as you talked about, Matt. It's arguably, I don't know if this is true, but the browser is probably the most, beyond the operating system, most commonly used piece of software, I have to imagine, right?
When you think of maybe 15 years ago, when Microsoft was still, maybe 18 years ago, when Microsoft was still a very scary company to everybody, it was, are there applications on Windows? And if Windows is controlled by Microsoft, that's 98% market share of operating systems. And if you don't go and play with Microsoft, you don't get an application. And the browser really created a second option, which is no, I can have a distributed, uncontrolled ability to implement applications. And the browser, and then eventually Android as well, were both moves that completely undercut the dominance of Microsoft implementing all of the ways of controlling an application. And remember, Microsoft was very nasty about, and this is why they got in trouble in around 2000 with their antitrust. When they saw all these people building applications, what they could do is consistently embrace, extend, and extinguish anything that was emerging in that technology ecosystem that wasn't supporting Microsoft's dominance.
As you mentioned, when we had Ricky on, he pointed out to us, and I hadn't really thought about it, there's been virtually no innovation in the browser because Chrome and Chromium became the dominant platform. But here we are today, and it's sort of interesting where if we look at OpenAI, they're rumored to be launching this browser called Aura in the next couple of weeks. Perplexity already launched Comet. All of a sudden, and you have then standalone stuff like Ladybird, which is not necessarily AI, but it's another competitor. So you've got all of this competition coming into the space, which arguably has been stagnant, and part of it is to steal the money of Google, so to speak, with advertising. The other compelling reason I think for these guys to do it is the real-time data, right? They need data to train the LLMs, so that's a compelling factor.
I think like you bringing up Google is worth clicking on, is that Google is the new Microsoft in this particular arena. And when we use the word browser, I think already we're playing into a framing that benefits Google, because it's an open browser. And look at Chromium. There's an open source version and all these different versions of the browser, but the browser is not the thing. The browser is a component of the real thing, which is the system of incentivizing people to create content, put it up on the web, monetize it, and discover it, right? That's the system. And when we talked to Ricky, he really reinforced, I'm glad we're prepared for this one. Go back and listen to Ricky. He's at least always entertaining, but he's also right. Um, that it's the discovery and monetization that's the real thing. And the browser is, I always like to talk about, you want to commoditize your complement. You want any competitive firm to have no ability to generate profit. Whereas the thing that you're good at and have complete control at, all the profits there. And an open source browser that anybody can copy and anybody can use, and Chrome is like that. Oh, look, we're just open. No, it's not free. All the money is abstracted away into the system that you absolutely control with an iron fist. And you've commoditized all of the entry points, which is no one could build a browser that's better than Chromium. They put huge amounts of money into it exactly to spoil that market so that no one can start climbing the ladder and attain the level of data, to your point, that would allow you to compete with Google, because Google gives away the browser. Then you can never kind of bootstrap yourself into a situation to be like Google. And AI is another opportunity to completely change the basis. I don't want to browse. I want to get answers. And AI allows me to do that in a completely new modality. But we call them browsers, these new AI things. But I think we're not browsing. We're going to be getting a direct answer by an AI. I'm not going to scroll through 10 links, and then I'm not going to read web pages and go through web rings and all the old concepts. I don't think we're going to be browsing with these. It's going to be a data consumption modality.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
Well,
going to be
let's
replacing the browser.
yeah, let's delve into that. So the framing is something called a browser, but what's the value to us as consumers, as users? And you're kind of scratching the surface there. And if you've used Claude or ChatGPT, you know it's a chatbot like interaction, which actually has its limits. It has its limits in terms of the type of tasks and things you can do. It's great for a very sort of natural chat conversation, but what if you're gathering information from multiple different sources, trying to synthesize them together? There's a lot of copy and pasting going on. So the scope, if you like, the aperture through which information is coming to you and being given to the chatbot is somewhat limited. If, let's take OpenAI, if they own the browser, so to speak, think of multiple tabs, and even this stuff I think will go away, but let's think of multiple tabs for a second. It's kind of the swivel chair challenge, where you're jumping around between different things to bring pieces of information together. That is kind of the promise here for us. I'm looking at my screen right now. I've got 3 different profiles on Chrome. I've got 6 tabs open in front of me. That's the symptom of a particular problem here, which is how do I get all this information together in in sort of one synthesized view? So that's kind of the promise here. I encourage people to go out and look at Comet, for example, where you're having this new age browser deal with all the tabs, all of that complexity. And you're saying, hey, can you check Amazon for this? Can you look at the reviews over here? Can you also see what people in Europe are doing for this? And can you see what I said in my emails about this? Because I can't remember. There's something that I want to tie together.
That's a really good point. I think the overload of the tab helps you understand why the current way of doing things is becoming. I'm like a tab zero, inbox zero. I'm very much like, I burn things down and I open up tabs, and then I always end the day usually with no more than 3 or 4 tabs. But I know people with 300 tabs open, and so Google installed all these like tab management things like that. But clearly the tab has become absurd. Some things that I think to think about that will help us prepare for what possibly a AI browser should be. But React is a good example of the limits of the web producing a new paradigm. So I ran a software development consultancy, and one of the big things that emerged in like 2017 era is Facebook had rebuilt their application not as a set of URLs and tabs, but rather you go to Facebook and then information is kind of dynamically constructed in that web page, right? Now that's Facebook working around Google's monopoly. So it's breaking essentially the browser URL paradigm. And now Facebook has control again. And I think that's a good way to think about what a new browser would look like. A lot of that is going to be internalized, not just inside these companies, but inside the LLM itself in a way that you can't really understand. But what do you do with React components? You can display media, you can display graphs, you can display opportunities for the user to take action. What's going to be happening with LLMs is all of those things are going to be dynamically created for the user, possibly not from a database, but from the LLM's own interpretation of what needs to happen, which is a very complicated database. And what can happen in the future is a much more expressive version of ChatGPT, which is not just text and links, which is, again, that's Google's way, into, I don't know, video, user interaction modes, especially, right? Like if videos can be created automatically, websites can certainly be created automatically. And what is a web page if it's not just React components, but something completely organic generated by the AI?
Yeah. The more I think about and listen to you, I think it's going to be more like the shift from browser to mobile app in terms of how compelling it's going to be, the new types of user interactions. We're definitely going to go much more multimodal. Even if you think about this, in order for any sort of web page to be allowed to use the mic, they need permissions through the browser. Well, if you're OpenAI and you own the browser, that's not really an issue for you. You suddenly have access
Mhm.
to all of those modes, which is fantastic. And you have this demand from us already where we're saying like, oh, I love ChatGPT. I love the chatbot interaction, but actually I need these types of interactions too. Why do I have to have copy and paste? Why do I have to do all of these things? I think it's going to be really interesting to see, does that flow through then to the websites, to the existing SaaS apps? Are we now suddenly saying, oh, hang on a second, we have this conduit to the user, which is OpenAI's browser, which does all these different types of things. And wow, we now need to harness the ability to do multimodal things and do these other types of things. So I think we're going to see that type of shift. It's not going to happen this year. I think probably next year is when we'll start to really realize, oh man, we need to present ourselves in a fundamentally different way.
Yeah, I think there's that presentation layer that's going to definitely change. But then again, the thing underneath the browser at all times was data collection. And some of the things that Google does with the web paradigm is you click a link. Now, if you click back in 2 seconds, that's a bounce rate. Then they know that's likely. They see that obviously in the Google in the browser, but then they also see it in the advertising token, the advertising cookies. Right, so they see those bounces, right? And so what that is a form of reinforcement learning. Google is trying to figure out, if I have a prompt, what are the web pages that will essentially satisfy? And the way that Google understands that is by seeing if you visited the page. And if you did visit the page, do you re-engage with that prompt, whether by bouncing and coming back to that search page and going to another blue link, or do I go all the way through and essentially satisfy that, or maybe make a purchase, which the stuff that Google really cares about is when you actually click through and make purchases that they can take cut of as well, right? So that's a reinforcement learning. It's like the AI says, I think this web page is going to satisfy that prompt for this user. And you're in New York City, you want pizza. Here's the 5-star pizza slice based on your geolocation that we know. So it's a vast set of data that they're using. They have an algorithm which is extraordinarily complex, and certainly, but it's a reinforcement learning process. It's they know what I want, and they have a means of assessing, did I even walk to that point? Forget the web. I mean, Google's still going to do very well. They have a lot of data. So they know if I've actually walked to that location, and maybe I pay with Google Pay, and they can actually assess, hey, that advertisement that we did went through Google Pay. We have all that information. So by the way, you should pay this much to be searched highly, right? That's a reinforcement learning economic process, right? How does OpenAI work in the web? Well, if they display some AI generated web page to you, they want to own the entire process so they can assess if it has satisfied the outcome, and maybe even be able to monetize people satisfying their outcome. You talk about agents, buying a trip. What if you said, I want to do on a trip to Ireland, and it not only had the flights, it had the hotels, it had all the attractions, and this new browser experience allowed them to reinforce that entire process of coming up with this trip for you in a way that they could monetize the hotels and trips and flights and restaurants along the way, which is what Google completely owns now.
We're sort of touching on the very edges of sort of SEO, but in an AI world as well. Is it conceivable here that we'll see different type of economic model slash monetization model going forward? Like it's easy to say, it's easy for us to jump straight to like, well, there'd be some sort of referral fee if I book a flight with you. But I'm just wondering, is it fundamental enough to even change that model? Are there different, because is it even the open web anymore? I guess it is, but it's
It's
intriguing. Is that up for
the
grabs as
open,
well?
what we consider the open web right now, like the really like the world spanning hyper valuable thing, requires economic actors. And the only way that the web works right now with economic actors is Google. But let's say OpenAI is successful here. We also should not just act what is the browser, because the browser determines web pages. You think about web companies and things like that. So if there's a new change, what is the new economic unit? Is it companies? Is it individuals? Is it AI driven companies that are, you think about like you walk past a place in a big city and the name of the restaurant is Chinese food near you, right? Because somebody types in or Chinese food near me. It's like Chinese food near me. Well, Google, they hacked Google. It's like, well, they want Chinese food near me, but there's also this thing within, 12 blocks called Chinese. So it's like, do they just, that's the SEO, is the hack. That type of independent creative people and companies and maybe agents and AIs as well responding to these economic incentives. That's really what you have to think about. Because if you say, oh, we own the browser, but it's the same thing, which is links to web page, Google is going to continue to have the advantage there. If on the other hand, whatever they introduce changes how people interact with the system. Like they come to it with as a web page, Google wins. Google is if as long as the frame of the web is about browsing a web page and seeing ads and making transactions on data that Google collects and owns, they win. So whatever they come up with this
Yeah.
browser has to kind of change the game. There has to be new kinds of companies, and I think AI, obviously, this idea of an independent AI agent that can be responsive to this new economic systems is disruptive. But again, how does this browser enable that shift to these new
Yeah.
economic
So,
units?
so it's a good term to think about here is a browser agent rather than a browser, right? Where you in some cases will give it a task to complete. And to your point, you may not visit any of these websites, right? It's the browser agent that actually does that. So that potentially changes kind of the monetization, the economic motivation for everybody in there. But it's taking eyeballs away from United's website, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's going to drive.
like that's a good example. I don't feel comfortable booking a United ticket via an AI agent right now. I don't even know how I would do it, but eventually I will. And so if they can own the browser and help midwife this transition to me just telling an AI what I want and it having enough sense to know that I like direct flights, I don't like bad times, I like cheap things. Like, if I search Google, a lot of times they'll show me something that's super expensive because Google benefits from that. If I had a dumb agent that just picked the first link, I'm going to buy like a $700 ticket that connects to Detroit for 4 hours. Like, I don't want that. And the risk that could happen is so great. Like the impact on my life of a bad ticket purchase means I'm still going to access the United web page for a long time. And United's not the kind of company that's going to deliver like an AI MCP server
Yeah,
anytime
yeah,
soon, right? So owning the browser allows them to help midwife that transition over to this new paradigm where the AI is good enough and I do trust it enough. Well, they want to be in that position that I'm using web pages with OpenAI now. When I'm using what's a good way to do my trip? It starts providing links and I use the web. And then eventually when this new agentic paradigm or whatever comes next that doesn't require me to actually look at a web page, well, they can be there to provide that functionality. And ultimately, though, the goal has to be to wean us off of the Google led data system that's oriented around URLs and data collected through browsing.
So is this sort of a milestone along the way? Is this kind of a big step function here, I suppose, actually is a better way of saying it, that we're now seeing, particularly with OpenAI, step up into the big leagues in terms of the financial and the economic opportunities?
Yeah, they have 500 million users. They have a extremely differentiated entry point where they can collect user intent in an extraordinary way. Like I can talk to the OpenAI voice agent is such an expressive mode relative to what I would type into Google. and they can prompt me and influence me and take me. Have you ever considered this type of restaurant? This type of food is really good. Like the expressiveness of an AI interaction relative to a chat bar, or sorry, the search bar is pretty immense. And so you can imagine him having a stranglehold on those 500 million ChatGPT users, because the experience of asking O3 for something versus going to Google is still, Google's coming along, but Google has to support all of those legacy searches. And so it's a very expensive way to provide AI versus having a one-on-one ChatGPT, and not just serving like 35 cents of AI every time somebody makes a dumb Google query, and optimize along the way, whereas Google can't. Uh, that being said, they have the user intent, but they don't have the ad models and the cost per click and all the good stuff that Google's built over the last 30 years.
So this is a lot bigger than we think it is. It's not just an announcement about a piece of software, right? We're talking about fundamentally different aperture in terms of data and interaction for OpenAI. We're talking about the early stages of shift in terms of how we as humans interact. Is it even with the web? I think it's now with information, right? And it's economically for the LLM guys, for the foundational model guys, it's really again opening the aperture.
Yeah, I agree with you, of course. Like, this is why we chose this topic this week. I was excited about it, but podcasts are better when people disagree. So I'm going to disagree with you in this extent. I don't think the browser's that interesting. I think the hires that OpenAI has made of very experienced ad people from Meta and Google, that's probably a bigger expression of where they're trying to pivot to as a company. And I don't really care about the browser, because if they just deliver a normal browser, that's them putting their stake in the road that eventually we need to own this ecosystem. But until we start to talk about the replacement for the web page, right, which is not a chat that has read a web page. Like maybe chat's the thing, but I don't see how it really reproduces, again, the economic incentives that sustain data creation in the long run, because OpenAI is running out of data.
I disagree actually on that one. I think this is going to be, yes, it'll still be a browser, but it's going to do two things. It's going to transition us as users towards a new usage paradigm, which we today.
So then, okay, so we're relying on that. But what is that new usage paradigm? And if you call it a browser, you're talking about the old paradigm. A new browser is not going to move my life. It's going to be something that maybe I just end up using more and more.
I think it will
by default, but it's not the change that's exciting to me. The change is when they come out and say web page is done, and now it's a AI replacement. This is something that I don't even have the ability to imagine right now what that thing is going to be, that allows people to consistently create new experiences and data that power OpenAI continuing to be relevant in the future, but also allows them to be paid for it, and is something that I use and that the AI can reinforce my usage on. And if it's just, complete AI, we talk about AI slop, like if it's just like this kind of semi-hallucinated AI thing every time, I don't think that's going to drive the same kind of consistency and power of the open web. On the other hand, if there's this thing that AI enables that is durable, reinforceable, much more accurate and reliable, like for instance, using an agent to purchase a ticket, they're probably going to check in with me and reinforce, is this what you want? Is this the type of thing? Let's use this interaction to learn more about you, but in a way that is very sustainable, human relatable. There's something emerging there. It might be agents, like an agent I trust. Hey, I have 20 agents and I know this one, I trust it. The agent is the new website. I think that's a paradigm. I don't know if that makes total sense, but I think it's the thing that we should be watching for is, with this new browser, do they come up with the next thing that is not a website that you're going to browse, but a mode of human interaction which allows you to do economics and reinforcement sustainably. And that's, I haven't heard anything about that yet. So I'll wait to see.
Well, Matt, I thought we were going to come on and just have a light chat about browsers. This has been way more intense than I thought. So I learned a lot.
This again is my favorite part of the week, is recording this podcast. If anyone likes this, great. But I always just enjoy talking to you, so I'm glad we get to record it.
Likewise. All right, well, let's leave it there. Let's remind folks, we love a bit of feedback, add comments, subscribe, all of that kind of rubbish, but reach out to Matt and I directly. We got some great guests coming over the next couple of weeks.
Great
So,
guests coming up. I'm excited about next week. So
all right. See you around.
see ya.